So welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and to a map that I haven't actually shown in quite a while, because I can't remember the last time I showed OSGILIATH, and certainly not the ruined version. Now I can't quite remember who sent this one to me, because I got sent quite a lot in quite a short span of time, so I built up a little bit of a backlog in the little bit of a delay in the upload schedule that I usually have, thanks to real life commitments getting in the way. But, you know, hopefully now we can get back on track, and I certainly have plenty of replays to sink my teeth into now that we're getting back to it. And I believe we'll go through the attackers first of all, as is customary. Obviously OSGILIATH divided into two halves, the defenders all on one side, the attackers, a lot of them are actually going to have to go across the river right into the sort of the heart of this defence over here, but the attackers will also be able to attack from this side of the river, and this side of the river I've always found is where the attackers can really make the defenders hurt a little bit. The lack of walls on the ruined version in particular means attacking archers are very, very useful on OSGILIATH. And starting off we have Ricky Beagle, who's going to be playing as Mordor, so he's got some fodder pushing the ram, as is customary, as well as some Moran on heavy maulers, obviously adding a bit of AP to the mix. Some decent AP, but obviously axemen, particularly orc axemen, tend to be a little bit low on defensive skill. Some more fodder there just in behind the towers that they have, more heavy maulers as well, so some more AP in behind here as well with the Sauron's Will, which obviously are much more of a quality focused unit than the heavy maulers just in front of them. They also inspire the nearby units around them, I believe, anyway. It's either inspiration or fear that they provide, and I believe it is inspiration. The Black Legion of Barad-dûr, obviously everyone's favourite Great Shield units with their ability to push through lines, although Mordor do need to be careful not to push too soon because they are somewhat isolated over on this side of the river, and the defenders will be able to overwhelm them quickly if Mordor advance too fast. Obviously in a 3v4 the defenders have a numbers disadvantage, but they will have a hefty quality advantage, and if Mordor spring their attack too soon, their lower quality units will end up being massacred by the defenders. Got some Orc Javelins over here as well, which are obviously a very cheap and cost effective way to get some kills. Some heavy maulers over here as well. A second unit of Black Legion. Olag High, which of course fantastic in a sustained combat fight. We'll see how well they can do it. Again, they can't be committed too early, otherwise they'll be overwhelmed, even as strong as they are. And then we also have a Troll Catapult over here, which obviously their crew is going to be more useful when they run out of ammo. Troll Catapults are also much faster at moving around. One of the real disadvantages of trying to use Siege is obviously how slow it tends to move, but Troll Catapult's much quicker, and their crew is much more useful in melee once you're out of ammo. But also, the Siege has got a fantastic shot into the heart of the city over there. And we've got some more Orc fodder out here on the flank. Joining him on this side of the river, at least a portion of Nien Nump's army, who is going to be the Misty Mountains. He's got some of his army over here, some of it is going to be over on the other side of the river as well, so he's divided his force a little bit. Some Blackback Berserkers pushing the tower, which you don't usually see, and I would, well, based on the fact there aren't really any walls over on this section of the city, I would certainly expect them to dismount or just use them as cover. They've also got some Heavy Goblin Halberds and Heavy Goblin Spears, so obviously a lot of AP in the Misty Mountains army, a lot of cheap AP as well, so will be cost effective against heavily armoured defenders. Some Goblin Infantry pushing a ram, again using your fodder to push the ram is the oldest tactic in the book. And then we've got some Heavy Goblin Infantry back here as well, which again, not really a big leap above fodder, to be honest with you. They have better armour and a better shield value, make a good tar pit both in a melee and ranged sense, but don't really expect them to get too much in the way of kills, certainly not in 0.96 anyway. And then some Cave Trolls, obviously again very good line breaker units, and he's also got some Black Urks of the Mountains here, just so all of his units over here aren't necessarily terrible in melee in terms of defensive skill, other than the Blackback Berserkers. The rest of his army is over here, which is a smaller portion of it. His Goblin King's Bodyguard is over here, so his General is here. He's also got another unit of Heavy Goblin Infantry, as well as some Heavy Goblin Crossbows, which the Heavy Goblin Crossbows are a very useful part of the Misty Mountains army. They tend to blend in, you know, they look very similar to a lot of the other Heavy Goblin units, and if you don't notice them, they can really do some heavy damage. Crossbow stopping power is very impressive. We've also got some White Uruk Fearmongers over here again. I've called them Ghetto Fountain Guard in the past because of how effective they can be. Halberdiers, very good AP on them, and if they can get into formation and sit in the centre of Misty Mountains line, they can not only make sure that the other goblins stay fighting, but also they can do a lot of heavy damage. And there's another unit of Heavy Goblin Infantry there as well. So, moving on to the other two armies that are within this part of the city, we have Mirkwood, played by 13 Pavlos 27. He's got some Athalion Enanwaith, which are one of the strongest single entity infantry units in the game. Thranduil is going to be within them as well. Obviously their numbers are very low, so they can be focused down, particularly seeing as they don't have a shield, but in a sustained fight they are very deadly. We've got some Hiri Peng over here as well, a couple of units of them, obviously very, very strong as well. Finding all of Mirkwood's units is going to be a bit of a pain, because obviously most of their units, other than their Hiri units, can hide. So we've got some Hiri Ek, some Hiri Lung, and some more Hiri Lung, so obviously some all around some very strong units here. But most of Mirkwood's units, it would appear, are going to be hiding, so Hetherley Tower, Thurney Tower, Delupeng, Em and Dwyer, all of that sort of thing can hide. And that would leave us... He's also got some more... Actually, it looks like he's mostly spent his money on the heavier Mirkwood unit, so I'd actually imagine he probably doesn't have too much in the way of hidden units, but there probably still are a few Thurney Tower at the very least. And finally we have Rudauer, played by Bushman Dictator. He's got a catapult as well. He's also got some Rudauer swordsmen pushing the siege tower, and the rest of his army is going to be a little bit further back. Obviously siege tower is going to be a little bit more useful on this side, where with the genuine defensive wall that hasn't crumbled. Couple of Rudauer swordsmen, 3 units of Rudauer swordsmen, in fact 4, so that means overall he's brought the full contingent of Rudauer swordsmen. Good workhorses, but not necessarily something that will win you the battle. Mercenary war chiefs as well, so obviously a little bit more skill. He's got some Pranodine berserkers in here, which they can throw their axes, and then they are very strong shock units in melee. Not multiple HP, but very good in terms of the stats they offer. The Witch Realm Enslavers, obviously very good multiple HP shock troops as well. Obviously that's more AP, so a lot of AP from the attackers so far. Some Rudauer marksmen for a bit of a ranged presence. A couple of units of Pranodine pikes. I'm a big fan of the Pranodine pikes just because they tend to perform quite well in melee. And also that shield value helps mitigate the weakness that pikes generally tend to have against archers. Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters are another very fine Rudauer unit. You know, the Spear Javelin hybrids, which are going to be made even more useful in 0.97 as it approaches. And a second unit of Pranodine berserkers. So overall a fairly mixed approach. From the attackers, it would probably actually be better for them if Mirkwood and Rudauer were on the other side of the river, and the Orcs were the ones that were trying to take the brunt of the casualties. Mirkwood in particular really don't want to be charging into the gut of this defence, because they're the ones that can't afford to take too many attritional casualties. So going through the defenders, they're obviously going to be all mixed together. We have Angel of Death playing as Isengard, we have Bobo 17k playing as Harad, and we have Dump Truck playing as Imladris. So the elves... I guess the elves are having a bit of a disagreement, and they've decided to enslave a bunch of the evil factions to help them do their bidding. So who's going to win? Team Imladris or Team Mirkwood? We have some Uruk-hai crossbows. Obviously crossbows are very, very useful in this sort of situation. Obviously the gaps in the walls can work for the defenders as well as for the attackers if the crossbows can line themselves up and Mordor charges in too quickly, because Mordor doesn't have a lot of range power by the looks of things. Those crossbows could be a real nightmare. Southron Warband, obviously good, fairly cheap AP spears. They're not quite as cheap as they used to be in times gone by, but even so they are still sort of akin to the heavy goblin spears, slightly lower cost, and what really sets them apart is their AP. We've got some Uruk-hai Reavers back here as well, so even more AP, only this is from Axemen, so obviously very much more focused around their attack. And all of this is going to be held together by a bit of elven quality, the Elder Renway Heru Hatal, which obviously as far as spears go, outside of the multiple HP spears anyway, Heru Hatal are probably going to be the strongest all around with their armour, high defensive skill as well. And Imladris' defensive value is obviously ridiculously high. Uruk-hai Reavers as well. We've also got some dismounted Serpent Guard with the armour upgrade, which I'm a really big fan of the Black Serpent unit model. And obviously again, they're pretty decent in terms of their quality. Overall their armour values are not quite as high as some of the more armour focused factions, and also their shield value is not quite as high either. They've got sort of slightly smaller bucklers, but overall their quality is pretty decent, and they can do some damage with those scimitars. As far as line infantry goes, very, very nice. 3 units of Imladris Guardians without the armour upgrade, but 3 is still a big investment. But as far as line infantry goes, this is probably one of the strongest examples in the game, if not the strongest actually, from Imladris, as it is currently anyway. The main issue with them normally is that you can't really mass them up. You can't really, you very rarely see more than 2. The fact that Dump Truck has brought 3 is a statement of intent that he really wants to hold a line at some point. Got some Uruk-hai crossbows up on the wall. Imladris sentries holding the gate. Unsurprising, they're going to be backed up by some Southron pikes as well, which Southron pikemen, their stats are pretty dreadful. As soon as their phalanx is broken, they will be butchered, but they do have AP to make up for that. So it's kind of an interesting unit, Southron pikes, because I believe they are the only pike unit in the game to have AP. But obviously they do suffer for that in other ways, and they will get massacred by archers as well, like most lower tier pikes will. Eldark Winger over here as well, just backing them up. Speaking of multiple HP spears, the Gwathi Arthan, who every time we see the Gwathi Arthan, they tend to do a fantastic job of staying alive. They don't necessarily kill things too quickly, but very, very resilient. But speaking of killing things quickly, the Haru Masil certainly will kill things quickly. In terms of stats, they're one of the strongest units in the game. although they don't have multiple HP, which is really the one genuine weakness they have. Obviously one cavalry charge and some sustained archer fire will bring them down all the same. Another company of archers, Uruk-hai archers this time. Some trollmen, obviously you'll always see the trollmen for Harad just because they're technically shock troops, although they do have shields, obviously nice AP, good damage. The shields also help mitigate some arrow fire as well, so all around a very strong unit, very integral part of Harad. Some Uruk-hai infantry, obviously again the Uruk-hai infantry, one of the pillars of Isengard. Some dismounted serpent guard just out here on the flank. As we go through the ruins we can see a Haradrim catapult. You can also see some Uruk-hai archers, some half-orc Bane guard, which lower on numbers in 0.96, but higher on defense. Particularly their armor values are a little bit more impressive than the other Isengard shock troops that you can bring, like the Dunlending berserkers and particularly the Uruk-hai reavers, Uruk-hai archers over there. And then we have some javelins as well, the Muhad beast hunters, Dunlending veterans and Uruk-hai pikemen combined together with some Eldar Quinga. A fully Haradrim frontline over here of Southron pikes and dismounted serpent guard with the upgrades. The town centre is going to be patrolled by Uruk-hai raiders, as well as some more sentries and some more Isengard elites in the guards of Orthanc, berserkers and Nazkai. Some Uruk-hai pikemen and some Dunlending veterans, although you can't actually go through these gaps over here, so it's a bit of a red herring. Defenders can shoot through them though, so that's another interesting little thing from Osgiliath. Gwathi Myrdain, obviously formerly the Smiths of Eregion, fantastic AP, very very strong individually. Some Hashari as well, which again, assassin units, nice defensive skill, low armor though, so very weak to archers. Champions of Nafrat, obviously extremely powerful in terms of the damage they can deal. Some Demons of the Desert, some Trollmen, Dismounted Serpent Guard, Herivital, so you can see overall the quality of the defenders pretty damn high, as you would expect when they're outnumbered. Muhad Beast Hunters, and then of course the Haradrim archers. It seems like in 0.96, Harad don't go anywhere without their low tier archers because they are so efficient. But without further ado, let's begin. Fairly long battle this as well. Usually you would give the advantage to the attackers in a situation where the defenders are outnumbered, but in this case I actually think I fancy the defenders' chances purely because of how the attackers have lined up. I feel as though the fact that Mirkwood are essentially the vanguard down here means that they're going to be the ones taking a lot of the damage. Actually, we missed a bunch of units up here as well, so Imladris Blade Masters and some Noritino warriors up there. So pretty effective front line there. Although it does look as though Mirkwood are going to be waiting for Rudour. Of the two, Rudour definitely need to be the ones to take the first wave here, because the quality of Mirkwood is going to be absolutely essential to try and equalise with a lot of, particularly the Imladris units. Imladris are really going to be fancying their chances against the Orcs and the Hillmen from Rudour. You can see over here though that the Troll Catapult already trying to get some pot shots off, and potentially get some good hits. Definitely one of the things that the attackers can take advantage of is the ruined walls of Osgiliath, and they're a nice hit. After a few misses, they finally managed to land a direct hit onto the Uruk-hai Reavers. Which, to be fair to the defenders, I mean, if they're going to lose a unit, they'd certainly pick some of these more disposable axemen. It would definitely be much more devastating if it were to hit the Elder Enway Herivital. You can see Mordor already moving forward. Mordor do need to be careful, because if they move forward too quickly, they could end up getting completely overwhelmed. It's a similar story over here for the Misty Mountains. The attackers really need to coordinate so they're all attacking at the same time, putting pressure. Because there's a lot of empty space within Osgiliath that the attackers, particularly on this side of the river, once they get in, can take advantage of. But that's only if the defenders have got most of their resources already occupied trying to hold the front line down. Which we shall see. Again, you can kind of say that's the case for every offensive siege. If the attackers coordinate themselves well, particularly when they've got a numbers advantage, the defenders are always going to find it difficult. But particularly here, I feel like, because the attackers are so sort of widespread all across the map. What have we here? Well, the Orc fodder were pushing forward their ram. However, the Elder Enway Herivital counter-attacking outside. Some Temple Executioners revealed themselves, as well as some Nazgul. That's very interesting. But I'm actually very surprised that Mordor, 2 units of Temple Executioners, how greedy of Ricky Beagle, particularly with the armour upgrade. I mean, in terms of melee quality then, they won't get overwhelmed. With those 2 units in particular, but also the Nazgul very difficult to bring down. But I'm very, very surprised he's not brought any range. Even the cheapest of Orc archers here could have been very, very handy to just make the defenders feel a little bit uncomfortable. The crumbled wall of Osgiliath is a real boon for the attackers to try and use. But yeah, the defenders are definitely going to need some more reinforcements over here. if the Temple Executioners are going to be taking point. Definitely one of the units that can give even the mighty Imladris pause. Meanwhile, what we've got going on over here? Some Rudar Swordsmen pushing up with the Rudar Catapult, Bushman Dictator. But this is probably not going to work. I mean, I don't believe a lot of the Osgiliath walls can't be destroyed. I believe that this is the one section that can be. See here that anything that's marked as a building essentially can't be destroyed, but also this one here with the sort of columns on top cannot. Okay. But yeah, I think you can bring down this sort of section of wall here. You can see actually where the seam is. So yeah, they can open up another gap. Potentially they would then have 3 choke points they can try and exploit from the defenders. But the ramp for the Misty Mountains is over here. The Misty Mountains have brought most of their army over to this side of the river. A bit of reinforcements over to help out Mirkwood and Rudar as well, but also it looks like they're going to be charging into a lot of quality from Harad. Upgraded Serpent Guard, Trollmen, and Javelins. Basic heavy goblins are not really going to be up to the task of taking on Harad's slightly stronger units, especially not with Imladris coming out in support. That is a pretty effective phalanx, and Mordor as well. The only ranged unit they have are the javelins, to be fair, which they could use to come in and try and sort of whittle down this front line, but I would imagine that the defenders would then try and counter-attack. You can see here the heavy maulers coming in first, perhaps trying to get their charge bonus off, but it's going to be difficult. Like, trying to get up to charge speed in this sort of environment is going to be difficult. And the low skill of the heavy maulers, you know, the AP will help them slightly against Imladris' spears, but overall their skill is by far and away not enough to go up against really quality elven units. Reaver's getting ready and in position as well. Troll Catapult is firing, but what at? I mean, you could go for the crossbows, but your chance of killing off the entire unit is relatively slim. And also they are taking cover behind the statue. A decent hit actually, that bisected the unit quite nicely, but personally I'm not sure going after the crossbows is altogether worth it. I mean, you would probably be better off trying to get your catapult in this position over here to try and go after this blob. You can see here now that there are Temple Executioners on the front line, which certainly will give the Haru Hatal pause, but a combination of Southron Warband and Uruk-hai Reavers coming to the aid of their Imladris overlords. Meanwhile, the Misty Mountain's still not coming in, but again the Haru Hatal forming up the front line. The Haraja Marchers firing. The Demons of the Desert are over here, and they've already done a huge amount of damage. My goodness. I'm not really sure whether using the Demons of the Desert on heavy goblin spears is worth it, but they've certainly blunted this Misty Mountain attack fairly effectively already. The heavy goblin spears are better than they look, particularly in 0.96. They will be brought more into line with the other heavy goblins in 0.97. So yeah, they've brought down the one section of wall that they can. The Blackback Berserkers, however, this is a bit of a mistake here from the Misty Mountains, because you can see here that the Demons of the Desert, this is definitely a worthwhile target to go after. If they can bring down the Blackback Mountain Berserkers, there's really nothing the Misty Mountains has over here in terms of melee quality to really hold their line together. Black Uruks won't cut the mustard, and Cave Trolls are not really designed to last a huge amount of time in melee. They're really there to smash the line apart, and then other units to try and follow them in through the gap they make. I think actually it's about time we turn the speed down just a tad, while all the attackers start to converge on their relative positions. But yeah, the Blackbacks have already been taking huge damage from the Haraja Marchers. The Demons of the Desert already proven themselves, and this is where the crumbled walls have actually worked in favour of the defenders. And I think this is because the forces over here from the attackers, not a lot of ranged presence. And on Osgiliath, the one thing that you can really do as the attackers is bring a lot of ranged units and start doing some damage. Over here, the heavy goblin spears. Actually, this is a relatively thin line of Haru Hatal. Need to be a little bit careful. Might be time to send in the Serpent Guard to help them out. No need to take unnecessary losses over here. Meanwhile, this blob over here, the defenders certainly keeping it down to a choke point fight, which if they can do more of that with their quality, they should be just fine. Mirkwood are really the only ones with units that might trouble them in that regard, but then they can always focus them down with ranged units as well. Combination of the high quality of Imladris units with the more disposable AP from Harad and Isengard so far proving to be a winning combination. But the Temple Executioners will remain on that front line for a long time. There we go. Ricky Beagle putting his catapult into a very strong position here, and this could be a game changer, because all it's going to take is a couple of hits right in the middle of this blob and the defense is going to fall apart immediately. And that means as well that the defenders are going to have to try and defend multiple choke points over here. Just take a quick look at the attackers as they converge on this position over here. Mirkwood coming over some Hiri Lang. But a single unit of them not going to be enough, I don't think, to deal with all of those Imladris Blade Masters. They really need to attack all at once. Individual units certainly not going to cut the mustard.
Repel the invaders. Send them back whence they came.
The Rudar Catapult actually getting a good hit there on the Gwathi Arthan. Lucky hit, but still. Trying to sort of fire in through that gap over there to get what kills they can. Again, choke point warfare does allow for catapults to get some nice hits. A grazing hit here on the front line here. The Uruk-hai Reavers managing to absorb some of the casualties, but it's really here on the front where they need to be careful, because if the Elder Enway Haru-Patal have a hole blown in them by the catapult, then that will definitely be very bad, because that's the thing which is holding this line together. They're trying to sort of push as close to the wall as they possibly can, try and make it as difficult as possible to hit. Imladris Guardians are coming in now as well, and I can see some javelins. The Orc Javelins getting in position, so Ricky Beagle, to give him his credit, is using what small skirmish presence he brought with the artillery and the javelins to his full advantage here. And unlike on the other side, he hasn't had to put up with a huge amount of defensive skirmishers. And there you can see the dismounted Serpent Guard moving in to reinforce the line, doing a good job there. What have we got over here? Nothing. No siege towers in position yet. All of the siege towers have been abandoned. Here come the cave trolls, and this might be the last play that Nien Numb is able to perform on this half of the battlefield, really, because he's already lost so much of his power. His siege towers have already been left behind, so he can't even take the sections of wall that are still intact. The cave trolls should be able to get through here, but the Demons of the Desert are moving off now. This is the play for the Misty Mountains. They could be able to get into the city like this, which will definitely do them a world of good, considering the dreadful start that they've had to endure. Rudar Swordsman coming forward with the ram. The Hiri Lang are waiting, which is good. They definitely need to wait, otherwise they'll just be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of Imladris Blade Masters here up on the wall, as I try to get inside there, but it won't let me. Rudar Catapult once again trying to take some pot shots. There are Trollmen there as well, that would have been a nice thing to hit. But just missing by a narrow margin. Another hit here from the Catapult, but not a really telling one. The only thing they've really hit is the sort of the back ranks of the Uruk-hai Reavers. And you can see actually that the defenders have very wisely tried to push into the gatehouse to prevent that Catapult from getting a good hit. So while Ricky Beagle definitely did the right thing by shifting his artillery, the defenders then responded in kind. Good game of cat and mouse here between the defensive infantry and the artillery. Mordor still have those Temple Executioners on the front line, but they're struggling actually. The only thing they have in support is the Heavy Maulers. The position of this ram is also not helping, because it's making it difficult for Mordor to really mass up. A lot of their infantry is a little bit further back as well. You can see there the Heavy Maulers trying to sort of reposition themselves. The Orc Javelins could get some decent damage done to the blob if they can get some shots off. And yeah, here you can see the weakness of the Cave Trolls on display. Not a sustained combat troll. If that had been the Olag High, they probably would have been in the city by now. But the Cave Trolls, what they really need to do is push through lines. If you leave them in combat, particularly with units of decent quality, like the Elder Enway, they will fall apart more quickly. The Cave Trolls, their line-breaking ability is very strong, but they do pay for that by being more fragile than other trolls. The only trolls they're stronger than in sustained melee, as the last one dies, are the Catapult Crew and the Drummers. I think even the Mountain Trolls are stronger than them, based purely on numbers. The Trollmen of Harad coming in to reinforce this line, and I really can't see the Heavy Goblins managing to get through here. The Black Uruks are coming in now, but Heavy Goblin Infantry and basic units like this, even with the support of the Black Uruks, is not going to be sufficient to bring down the Trollmen. Very, very strong unit in melee. And with the AP in particular, the one defensive advantage the Heavy Goblins have. Not going to work out for them. Here come the Delupeng, Yam and Dwyer. There's also some Rudar marksmen trying to shoot over the buildings into the Isengard positions in the town centre. But the attack on the front, or over the river, is now sort of starting to become more of a... It's getting closer and closer, which they need to, because Mordor and the Misty Mountains have already been attacking. And the longer that goes on, you would have to imagine the defenders will be feeling pretty good about that, because eventually they might be able to bring reinforcements over to this front line. They need to start attacking in some capacity, even if the defences over here are pretty strong. Elder Enway, backed up again by a lot of their slaves. Uruk-hai pikemen on the front line. That is a nasty looking phalanx. Again, the upgraded Serpent Guard providing a bit of a screen as well, making sure that the phalanx can't be broken quite so easily. You can see the Troll Catapult trying to get into a position where it can shoot again. Looks like a couple of units of Southron Warband have come over to help. But the Elder Enway really kicking ass and taking names as they push through the gate, although this might be where they start to peter out. They've pushed maybe a little bit too far. The Temple Executioners are still alive. They've taken some losses, but at this point Imladris probably not in the best of positions. The Orc Javelins firing into the Muhard Beast Hunters and getting the first volley off, which in a skirmish fight that can be the main difference maker. Getting the first shot could be the difference between success and failure. Some reinforcements are still the Black Legion, which are being saved for the time being, which I can see why, because this fight has already turned into a bit of a grind, which maybe saving the Black Legion for a little bit later when the choke points, or when the defences get a little bit thinner, and success is a little bit more of a guarantee. Half-Orc Baneguard getting ready to charge in as well. The Trollmen defeat seems certain. I wasn't expecting that. Although I believe they have also sent in some Halberdiers with their phalanx, which might be helping out matters. The Cave Troll Drummers are also over here helping the Goblins stay in melee, but with the support of the Baneguard's numbers and also the Beast Hunters getting into a position where they can start throwing their javelins into the flank of the Misty Mountains army, I highly doubt this is going to go all that well. I mean, to be fair, the Misty Mountains, despite numerous setbacks, have still managed to at least do something over on this flank, but unfortunately I think their attack is going to fall apart, and that is going to allow the defenders to commit some resources elsewhere. Mordor's attack is going to last longer purely because they have all of their army over here rather than just a section of it. And they do need to, because if the defenders are able to sort of focus all their attention on the front wall, then I don't really see how the attacks are going to be able to claim too much success here. They're trying to skirmish, do some damage to these slightly more fragile units like the Southron Pikemen. What have we here? The Hiri Lang still waiting. Here comes the Ram. Rudar Swordsman going to knock down the main gate. Two gates right next to each other. Here are the Thurney Tower. Directly in front over here, being given free rein to shoot into the front of this phalanx, although the Uruk-hai Raiders are taking the majority of those hits, and also the Eldar Quinga are shooting the Thurney Tower, which Mirkwood's archers are fantastic at dealing damage, but got a bit of a glass jaw, have Mirkwood. Not very high armour. At range you can certainly start to do some damage with them with quantity, especially in .96, where cheap archers are very, very efficient. Rudar marksmen shooting from on high, ballooning their arrows over the wall. Some trollmen over here as well, helping to shore up this line. The Harry Masil as well are such a strong unit in a blob fight, which eventually you would imagine that is what's going to be happening. The Troll Catapult trying to shoot right along the Haradrim archers, which, based on relative positions, they could destroy this entire unit, but it's also a very cheap unit to be going after with some very high value catapult ammunition. You can see here though that the Elven units over here have been overwhelmed finally. A couple of companies of Southron Warband getting ready to hold the line. A little bit of miscommunication here from the defenders, I think, because they basically allowed the Elven units to die all on their lonesome. But this unit of Imladris Guardians will have the support of the Southron Warband, so Elven skill combined with some cheap AP. Again, it's proved to be a pretty good combo so far.
Those cursed vipers are at our gates with their ram.
Half-Orc Baneguard, slightly less cheap AP, a little bit more expensive. Not breaking the bank by any means, but coming over here with some damage. Again, I feel as though the AP has definitely worked wonders against Mordor and the Misty Mountains, purely because a lot of their quite meagre defensive values on some of their more basic units come down almost entirely to their armour rather than their defensive skill. So even cheap AP units can do a pretty big number on the orcs. Obviously Harad and Isengard know all about that, because the reverse is also true. Less so for Harad, a little bit less focused on their armour to be fair, but here come the Cave Troll Drummers. The Misty Mountains are really just committing everything at this point. This doomed attack really. Those Demons of the Desert just vanquishing those Blackback Berserkers. Demons of the Desert obviously one of the scariest units that has a ranged attack in the game. The strongest javelins, and I think that will still be the case in 0.97 as well. Body piercing, sends units flying. But obviously very expensive, and also, despite having multiple HP, you only have to look at them to realise they don't have a lot of armour, so you can skirmish them down. But obviously in a siege situation like this, Harad have used them very, very nicely. Still, the attack on this side has not gotten underway, which, the longer they delay, the more the defensive skirmishers are able to whittle them down. I think what the attackers are trying to do is sort of try and weaken the defenders a little bit, which they have been somewhat successful in doing. But the longer they leave it, the closer to destruction Mordor, and particularly the Misty Mountains on this side of the river, come. Mordor, to be fair, could probably put up a fight for quite some time with the quality of units they still have over here. Stuff like the Sauron's Will, they've got another Temple Executioner, and the Nazgul, and the Olag High. But you can see over there's some heavy Maulers and Orc fodder. But, Mordor are not going to be able to break into the settlement if the defenders are allowed to continuously reinforce the choke points they're trying to go through.
Foes are attacking our gates with rams.
Well, here come the Olag High, so a bit of a statement of intent by Ricky Beagle here. He's not been backwards in coming forward so far. He needs a little bit more from his allies to attack the front, because again, he's doing his part. But if the defenders can continuously reinforce, then he's not going to have the greatest amount of success as Murukai crossways. To be fair, I mean, the defenders, it looks as though they're content to leave these forces over here. And Mordor again trying to open up more choke points, trying to open up more avenues of attack. Some Serpent Guard and Muhard Beast Hunters are over here to meet this advance. I'd back the Serpent Guard as well, particularly with the armour upgrade against the heavy Maulers. They may be AP, but again, Harad less focused on their armour. Serpent Guard not a half bad unit in melee. Got a bit of skill of their own. You can see here, actually, the Misty Mountains forcing a little bit of a retreat there from the half-orc Bane Guard. Shaken. Some Murukai infantry in there as well, although there are some Hashari, which I can only assume what they're trying to do is sort of draw the Misty Mountains in, and then the Hashari will spring the trap. And the skill of the Hashari will carve through goblins, especially if they're able to... Actually, the Hashari have been revealed, so I'm not really sure what the thinking was behind this, but even so, the Misty Mountains will not be getting too much further. The heavy goblin infantry routes off. The Hashari just going to avoid the phalanx. If they were able to recharge those halberds, it would be devastating. Meanwhile, hello, we finally have the assault. Rudar coming in very quickly, so quickly that I didn't notice it. Granadine Pikemen and Rudar Swordsmen, a classic front line. Taking a bunch of arrow fire there from crossbows, actually. I thought I recognised that sound effect. It was crossbow bolts. See here that the Rudar marksmen that are out of ammunition also being committed to melee, and actually the quick nature of this assault has left the defenders a little bit thin on the ground. Oh, and a very nice hit there on the defensive catapult from Harad. Here come the Heru Masil, so this engagement here could decide a lot. There goes the main gate. But the Heru Masil being committed here, if they take a catapult hit, that could be fairly telling. Noratino warriors and Haraja marchers backing them up, but the Heru Masil in melee are going to have absolutely no problem just mowing their way through Rudar swordsmen. Backed up by the crossbows as well. A winning combo. Still this wall not being assaulted just yet. The attackers, again, there are Imladris Blade Masters up there, so it's a pretty daunting task, but a unit of Hiri Lang and Rudar swordsmen together should be able to overwhelm them. The Hiri Lang in particular can trade relatively evenly with them, and the Rudar swordsmen would just be gravy. A lot of arrow fire just zooming backwards and forwards, although the Rudar catapult crew is taking a huge amount of fire, so if they're going to make some critical shots, it's going to have to be quick, and also the attackers are going to need to send in reinforcements. This first wave from Rudauer is all well and good. A nice hit there. But I think that was mostly on Noritino warriors and Haradrim archers, not really on the Heramesil. Well, the Heramesil defeat seems certain. That must be the ranged fire having an impact. Ah. Reforged javelins. Now, if Bushman Dictator is paying attention, he'll notice that he can climb up on this wall with his Reforged javelins and throw them down. That will obviously open them up to the Uruk-hai crossbows, but the Reforged javelins could do enormous damage to the Heramesil, which I think is going to be his target anyway. I think it's about time that we once again turn the speed down just a little bit as the blob fights continue. Let's go and see how Mordor are getting on while all this is happening. Mordor actually forcing their way into the settlement. The Uruk-hai infantry over here, you can see that a unit of dismounted Serpent Guard coming over in support of the Southron Warband, which were pushed out of the way. Only 3 of those initial Temple Executioners left, but they've been through an awful lot. And they're still alive, just about. But the Sauron's Will are in a bit of trouble here. They are now surrounded, as are the Southron Warband, to be fair. But there are also these Uruk-hai infantry, but Black Legion? There's no real need to push through this. The Black Legion might be a bit of a waste, but also I think Mordor have committed so much of their infantry at this point that they need to commit something, and the Black Legion is kind of the only option they have left. What's going on over here? Mordor are actually getting into the settlement over here as well. So at this point it's going to be a case of the defenders trying to plug all the gaps, trying to sort of fall back to the heart of the city. You can see here that the Uruk-hai archers trying to hold back Sauron's Will, which will not go too well. But the Hashari will fare far better. Obviously not very focused on their armour, so the AP from the Sauron's Will not be too effective. And the Hashari themselves have got some very nice defensive skill as assassin units. Meanwhile, Muhad Beast Hunters reloading, but caught by the heavy maulers. They will, however, be supported by Uruk-hai infantry, as well as the Hashari. The Bane Guard that survived the encounter with the Misty Mountains also over here. What have we got here? Just a single unit of heavy goblin infantry biding their time. All that remains of the Misty Mountains assault on this side of the river. Larger sentries also waiting over here. So let's go and see what's happening over here, because this could be pretty telling, this engagement. The Reforged javelins must be doing huge damage, and they're hitting the Demons of the Desert, which... The Demons of the Desert, very, very damaging, but not very good at taking ranged fire, particularly not like this. Don't know what the hell happened there. But yeah, the Demons of the Desert are going to lose this fight hard to the Reforged javelins. Again, 2 of the strongest javelin units in the game going toe-to-toe between 2 of the very javelin-focused factions in the game. And that is another nice hit there from the catapult. So initially the defenders were doing quite well, but now starting to struggle a little bit. Now that the attackers are being a little bit more aggressive. Rudauer with their javelins in particular proving to be a real nightmare over on this front line. The Franadine pikemen and the Rudauer swordsmen forming up a front line to hold them in place as the catapults and javelins fire them in. And also the worrying thing for the defenders over on this side is the fact that Merc would have not really committed an awful lot of their units yet, so Rudauer would have been taking the bulk of the casualties, allowing the more quality Mirkwood troops to still be alive for the late game. Here we can see the Olag-hai, which is still just about alive, only just though. The Black Legion, which are, again, the Black Legion are not the best in sustained melee, and this is being proven here. A combination of Serpent Guard and Uruk-hai infantry and the AP from the Southern Warband going to be enough to take them down. The Olag-hai are trying their best to help them, but there are only 2 of them remaining, so the impact they're going to have probably going to be fairly limited. As we continue to cycle around the battlefield, Muhad Beast Hunters holding position here. They could actually run around and start throwing javelins into the back of this group over here, but it might turn out to be unnecessary because the Sauron's Will are really struggling up against the Hashari. The Hashari are a very risky unit to bring most of the time, purely because they're so weak to arrows, as most sort of ambush-focused assassin units are. And unlike stuff like the Gwathi, and Galan, they don't have, or the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen as well, they don't have a ranged attack. Very much like the Thieves of Tharbad from Cardolan. What have we over here? The Hashari again getting into melee alongside the Uruk-hai infantry. The Bane Guard coming over in support as well. The Moran on heavy maulers unsurprisingly breaking, which should allow this force to sort of start wrapping up the line, which they could follow all the way down to the gate that Mordor are attacking. I do still feel as though the clock is ticking for the attackers here, because eventually Mordor are going to run out of steam, and that is going to allow the defenders to concentrate their force. And speaking of which, the attackers are still mainly focusing on one side only. I think the Reforged javelins are out of ammunition, they're now in melee. Multiple HP actually, and AP. So they could actually be pretty useful in melee. The Harrow are still here, and the line has now stabilised. Now that the javelins are not really firing anymore, and also that the catapult doesn't really have a good shot, the skill of the elves is once again giving Rudauer a little bit of pause. Getting nice and close here into this front line. The generic Imladris Guardians, of course, using the same unit model as the Mithlond Nobles. Hello. This is not good. The Trollmen were the only thing holding back the attackers over here, and they have now fallen away. The defensive catapult narrowly missing there. The Demons of the Desert charging into melee, but Rudauer pushing through the Trollmen. Only 8 of them remaining. You can see the pikes also just pushing them further back and back into the wall. The Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters now potentially going to be able to fire as well. The Black Wolves are there, again, multiple HP. Berserker units. No warriors, but again, numbers are a problem here. I think actually the defenders have probably... It feels like the defenders have kind of given up on this choke point over here a little bit, and they're just sort of letting those units fight for as long as they can. They're trying to sort of sort out other defensive positions. I mean, it's possible, but the fact that they're still sort of being more aggressive elsewhere in the settlement, you know, they really need to make sure that their defences stay in good shape. Otherwise, they're going to be slowly but surely cut off from one another, which as the defenders is a terrible fate to befall you. Uruk-hai archers from the front. This unit of Orc fodder, I can't imagine they're going to last all that much longer. Uruk-hai infantry and Hatful Bane Guard coming in from the rear. What have we back here? Just a unit of heavy maulers that have returned. Again, Ricky Beagle is doing his best to sort of keep his army both aggressive and afloat. But I don't think he's going to have too many answers to something like this, because the Muhad Beast Hunters are over here as well, which javelins are something he can't really answer too well at this point. I mean, he does have the catapult, but the problem with the catapult is you're really unlikely to kill off an entire unit in a single volley unless they're really closely packed together. This really is all that remains of Mordor. They still have the Nazgûl somewhere. The Nazgûl have actually been committed, so that's interesting. They still have some Temple Executioners, some Javelins and some Black Legion, but not really an army anymore. There's the Troll Catapult getting ready for another hit. The Dismounted Serpent Guard, the Uruk-hai infantry, proving themselves to be of a pretty good quality. Not looking out of place standing next to the Elves. The Hashari as well. But this is the one area where the defenders are looking a little bit ropey. They are now getting some reinforcements over here. The catapult is still firing. Hashari are in here. Dismounted Serpent Guard. Muhad Beast Hunters pulling out their little maces. But the Black Wolves have also come forward, as well as some Dalupang. Which, the Dalupang, have they used up their ammunition? If they have, then that's unfortunate. How happened here? Have they just been stood there taking casualties? I guess these units are just here at this point to sort of prevent any sort of counter-attack. There's still some Hiriauth over on the other side of the river. Some more quality-focused units. Still a lot of the Mirkwood units sort of waiting, biding their time. I don't know. I mean, this is the one area where the attackers are making some ground, but now with the Haradrim reinforcements over here, and the crossbows also in close proximity, there's some Snow Trolls, which they're significantly better in sustained combat than the Cave Trolls. They should be able to do a decent amount of damage. I mean, they are supported, and here come Mirkwood as well. Some of their units seem to have taken some pretty nasty range fire, which is the price they pay for dawdling too long in front of the walls trying to skirmish with the defenders. There goes a rout though from the Muhad Beast Hunters, not liking being in melee with the trolls at all, and now with the arrival of the elves, can the attackers make this momentum count? They could also, you know, the issue is, I don't know if the attackers or defenders know this, but these little archers here, they can transition between these two areas, so the defenders could technically surround the attackers if they commit too many units to this one attack, rather than trying to spread their forces out. And again, trying to concentrate your forces as the attackers is fine, provided it's done correctly, but if you do it incorrectly, all it allows the defenders to do is focus their, in all probability, higher quality armies on your lower quality ones. Here comes some more Hashari, which have been running around all over the place, all over the settlement, lending their skill where it has been most needed. The Black Legion are trying to push through, but I think really we're starting to see the end of the Mordor resistance. The Nazgul and the Temple Executioners will take a pretty decent beating, but I don't really feel as though they have the numbers anymore. Even if they do push through, Mordor aren't really going to be a huge factor in the late game, I don't think. Ricky Beagle's done his best though, and he certainly hasn't gone down for free. He's taken his pound of flesh from the defenders. But I think overall the defenders can afford to be pretty pleased with their work on the outer crumbled wall here at the rear of their defences, because it's all gone rather well. There's a single red triangle over here. The heavy goblin infantry bided their time and eventually tried to make a play for the town centre, but with the Gwathi Myrdain in close proximity, it was never going to go well for heavy goblin infantry, not against the Smiths of Eregion. Some units over here just waiting in reserve, some Isengard forces. Still these units waiting. The Imladris Blade Masters coming down off the wall and now counter-attacking outside. And these units over here are of a quality which is not going to give the Imladris Blade Masters too much to worry about, provided they... and they're also being supported by the Imladris Pikes, so yeah, counter-attack from the defenders, which is the right thing to do here, because these units over here not of high enough quality. The attackers trying to concentrate their force over here, and they are slowly but surely pushing the defenders ever further backwards. But now you can see that some slightly more serious defensive units have been committed. Uruk-hai Berserkers and Champions of Nafarat. The AP on both of these units not too useful against Rudauer and Mirkwood, but both are multiple HP, both of them have got high attack values, and both of them will inflict casualties. The Uruk-hai Berserkers are basically just a beefier, stronger version of the Black Wolds. And obviously the Champions of Nafarat, one of the strongest damage-dealing multiple HP units in the game, I would say. They've got a very slight shield value as well. As far as sort of armour-piercing shock troops go, the Champions of Nafarat can certainly count themselves up there, alongside stuff like the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. And obviously everyone knows Angmar's infantry is particularly scary at the high end. Southron Warband are routing, actually. The presence of the Nazgul on the front line possibly unsettling them a little bit. Of course, finding the Nazgul when they're in melee with Hashari is going to be fairly awkward. I mean, I can see them, but they do tend to blend in a little bit. You had Beast Hunters just biding their time. The Troll Catapult might still have ammo. Still those Orc Javelins and Temple Executioners. Fair play to Mordor. They've rationed themselves out pretty well. You can see over here that a secondary defensive line is being formed. Uruk-hai Archers getting into position. I think the defenders realise eventually this line is going to fall, but with the committal of Champions of Nafarat and Uruk-hai Berserkers, I question whether the attackers are going to have enough left after this is all said and done. The Atmor's Troll Hunters are sort of engaged in a bit of a javelin duel with the Muhad Beast Hunters, and winning. Catapult duel. Getting a couple of Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters. I don't know whether the Rudauer artillery has got any ammunition left. If it does, then that could certainly help the attackers out a little bit. As the street fight continues, these Hiri Lang are trying to get in behind, but they're shaken. Trying to push your way through Uruk-hai Berserkers is probably not the best idea. Heavy Goblin Crossbows getting into position, so this attack out here... some Mountain Orc Berserkers. Haven't seen a lot of them recently. But this counter-attack from Imladris, a combination of sentries and blade masters, is something which cannot be taken lightly, and indeed Rudauer are marching their Ramavine Berserkers forward, and their thrown axes should do a decent amount of damage, provided they can actually shoot them. They'd be better off putting them over here, to be honest with you, if that was possible. I mean, I know that positioning your units in close quarters like this can be really awkward. Here come the axes, though. Unfortunately, that ram is actually going to absorb some of them. Obviously, pieces of siege equipment like this do have a tendency to block shots a lot of the time. Here come the axes thrown. They're actually going after the Uruk-hai Pikemen and Dunlanding Veterans, which is rather confusing to me, because the real threat here is from the Imladris units. The Franodine Berserkers could be pretty decent in melee against the Imladris forces as well. The AP, they're pretty decent. I mean, the skill is obviously not as high. If they're supported, though, they could do some damage. Hirialth coming forward. How is this attack going? The secondary line has been... They are now sending more reinforcements over here to hold this front line, which I think is the right thing to do, because you can see here that this attack is now starting to fall apart. Again, Imladris just coming in with quality. Harad and Isengard just sort of adding the chaff around the Imladris units, and it so far has worked out very, very nicely, I must say. The champions of Nafra and Uruk-hai Berserk is softening them up for the kill, and now Imladris spears and pikes just getting in place and just denying access. Uruk-hai infantry coming forward, but they're already wavering and exhausted. Franodine Berserkers coming forward, White Uruk Fearmongers, they're running lower on resources all the time here. How are Mordor getting on? Muhard Beast Hunters coming forward. Mordor will win over here, I think. The Temple Executioners, what's left of the Nazgul. The Black Legion are all dead by the looks of things. But like I said, Mordor, even if they're victorious, if those Muhard Beast Hunters have ammunition, they probably won't be victorious actually, but the problem is, even if they are victorious, they don't really have enough men left to really do any damage to the defensive positions, which means the defenders have been able to bottle up the attackers into these two streets here at the front. Which, on Osgiliath, if you can do that as the defenders, you're always in a good place. As the attackers, you really want to be trying to stretch them out in the wide streets if you can. And oftentimes that is sort of decided by how the attackers do in this back section of the field over here. And ultimately, unfortunately for them, the Misty Mountains took such a beating early on. No ranged units confuses me as well. The pressure you can put on the defenders on this area with the crumbled walls in the ruined city of Osgiliath is significant. But even on the fixed version of Osgiliath, you know, the wider streets, once the attackers have access to it, you can really spread out and start to do damage to the defenders. That is unfortunate for Imladris, actually. The Imladris sentries and blade masters becoming shaken and broken. A combination of the axe throwers and the crossbows, I would assume, being held in place by the Hirialth. But the Harad general, perhaps not all over just yet. Again, when the attackers have a numbers advantage, they can often afford more mistakes than the defenders, and losing that level of infantry could be seen as a pretty major mistake. The Uruk-hai, the heavy goblin crossbows proving themselves once again very, very strong. Again, they have a real tendency to go unnoticed, and in this situation they got into a nice position and really started pinning the Imladris line. Here you can see a bit of a pike duel, the White Uruk Fearmongers going up against the Imladris sentries. To be fair, it's halberdiers, but once again the axe throwers coming in. Rudauer starting to do some real damage, just as they did when they first pushed in here. Rudauer could be the ones to facilitate a bit more damage being inflicted to the defenders here. Witch Realm Enslavers pulling back. Again, the Witch Realm Enslavers, they really need to commit those when the time is right, because that's the sort of elite unit which could really secure victory for the attackers in the late game. There's a break from heavy goblin infantry, that's not too surprising. But now the Franodine Berserkers are coming in support of the White Uruk Fearmongers and the Hirialth on the front line. But the pure quality of Imladris still holding, but they're going to need more reinforcements, I think, on this front. Again, they're receiving some ranged backup from the Uruk-hai archers, but some Nazkai. Nazkai, I think, just sort of waiting for what's left of Mordor. And actually, Mordor, maybe I wasn't giving them enough credit, because 42 Temple Executioners and 7 Nazgul backed up by some Javelins and the Troll Catapult is not something to be taken too lightly. It's something the defenders could easily overwhelm, but if they commit too many resources over here, they're going to leave the defences at the front here a little bit barren, especially after that ill-fated assault out of the gate, and they're going for another attack out of the gate, which this time has gone a little bit better because they have engaged, or they've pushed the crossbows back a little bit. But if the crossbows get back into position, they're once again just going to shoot right into the side of the Gwathi Myrdain, as well as all of these Isengard units which are coming forward in support as well, which this could be the moment the attackers have been waiting for. The defenders have made very little in the way of mistakes so far throughout this fight, but this could be a pretty key one. The crossbow bolts coming in, doing damage to the Uruk-hai pikemen. they continue to do a lot of damage, all of these Imladris units which have gone down the drain could prove to be real costly. But the Franadine Berserkers, as strong as they are not going to be able to withstand Gwathi Myrdain. Especially not when they're backed up by a slew of more disposable units like the Hillmen from Dunland. Going up against their fellow evil men from the west in Rudour. With the backup of Imladris, they're probably feeling pretty smug about things right now. Some Mirkwood units in close proximity. What have we here? Hiri Auth. What's this unit across the Athalioni Namwait is still miles away from the front line, which is another real mistake. They need to be near the front line, because they're exactly the sort of unit which can do tons and tons of damage, because at this point the attackers are pretty much going to be reliant on some of their elite units to pull their weight, but elite units alone will not work out. You need some chaff around them, otherwise they just have a tendency to be overwhelmed. What's this? Orc Javies. Hello. The Uruk-hai archers holding the Temple Executioners in place, and now the Nazkai are going to be able to recharge them, so some tricksy manoeuvring there from Angel of Death, very well played. And the Temple Executioners taking a charge from the Nazkai, and they're going to cycle charge in and out. Cycle charging with shock troops is not as effective as it is with cavalry, purely and also the Orc Javelins are over here, so while the manoeuvring was good, Ricky Beagle responds in kind by shooting them with javelins. The Nazkai are probably better off trying to go after the Orc Javelins, to be fair. Because if they just stay in melee with their back to the Javelins, it's going to go very poorly. Obviously, this does mean that the Uruk-hai archers are going to have to suffer a combination of Executioners and Nazkai, which is obviously not going to go well for them. So a bit of a game of cat and mouse over here. The Nazkai will be able to get another charge. Temple Executioners are stronger 1-to-1 than Nazkai, but it is really a clash of the Titans, the folk of the ring, against Sauron's chosen Black Numenorians. Not a very effective charge, though. These cheap Orc Javelins are really proving themselves to be worthwhile. Very well played from Mordor and Isengard both, trying to sort of outmaneuver one another. Here comes Hiri Auth. Imladris still clinging on, but they're slowly but surely losing this front line. The White Uruk Fearmongers holding this line together nicely with their phalanx, and supported by Berserkers and Mirkwood infantry. It's actually going pretty well for the attackers there still. Although over here is where the attackers are starting to fall away. You can see here the Dunlanding veterans are charging in. The crossbows are still here. The crossbows really need to be engaged in melee, to be honest with you. The Hiriak victory still seems certain because they're only engaged by Isengard units. If the Gwathi Myrdain were to engage them as well, that would be a different story altogether, especially when they're pointing the wrong way. What have we here? Goblin King's Bodyguard. Well, Misty Mountains are pretty much spent at this point. It was a tough start to the battle for them, but they have at least proven themselves to be useful in these final stages and trying to help Mirkwood and Rudour push through. The Witch Realm and Slavers are here on the front line as well, so yeah, I would say they're going to win over on this choke point over here. Uruk-hai archers are routing off. They're going to receive some reinforcements from Mordor as well, so the attackers actually pushing the defenders back. What do the defenders actually have left would be my question. Pretty battered and bruised units, honestly. The Guards of Orthanc, some of the Isengard forces are the only thing they have left which are in really top condition. No bueno for them. I'm wondering if the Mirkwood player hasn't crashed here, because there's a bunch of these units which are just sort of stood around pointing the wrong way. His general is still marooned over on the other side of the river. Victory seems certain. And Imladris still just hanging out. Let's see what the percentage of kills are. It's close. The defenders, well, it's dead even now. The defenders were ahead, but obviously the attackers do have a tendency to come back strong in the late game, and it's proving to be so this time as well. You can see Azog right in amongst it. Orc Javelins putting themselves in position to control catapult. A bunch of routing archers, the Bane Guard are coming forward. More veterans, more pikes, the Guards of Orthanc as well, but no showstoppers really. The Nazkai were dealt with. Harad don't have a lot left either, I don't think. Hiri Auth. White Uruk Fearmongers shifting their focus. Here come the Witch Armored Slavers. They're going to be meeting up with Mordor. Yeah, there's a lot of elites left from the attackers. Huh. Who'd have thunk? Here come the White Orc Fearmongers. The Dunlanding veterans are going to try and surround this force over here. No, Mirkwood's units are still moving. Very, very odd indeed. Here we can see the Dunlanding veterans trying to come out here and shut down the crossbows, but they probably have bigger concerns at this point. The army of doom that's approaching their town centre is perhaps more of a concern. The Gwathi Myrdain are also just hanging around at this point. Very odd play from both of the Elven overlords here. Here come Mirkwood. This is, yeah, here Aradirith Amon Lank as well. I think the attackers have got this in the bag at this point. Mirkwood's units simply going to be too strong. Dunlanding veterans are not going to be sufficient. I kind of like the Dunlanding veterans and how they look. Ever since Middle, I kind of like the sort of more simplistic look they have going on. But they are not what is called for here, I don't think. Meanwhile, oof, nice hit there on the Guards of Orthanc. Saruman rebelling against his master. That's some friendly fire. But unfortunately, all of the Mordor units that are left are highly elite and are very unlikely to break. Other than the Orc Javelins, but even so. Unfortunate bit of friendly fire there. The Uruk-hai pikemen trying to hold down this position, but at this point it's really only a matter of time, I think, before the defenders finally succumb. Bane Guard have returned, Reavers. There are some sentries, but they're perpetually routing. And at this point it really is just Isengard left. Doesn't seem like Harad and Imladris have got all that much left, and Isengard alone are not going to be able to withstand what's left of Mordor and Mirkwood. That Troll Catapult has been a menace all game. Picking its targets, here comes some Hirialth as well. The Uruk-hai Pikes trying their best to keep those units at arm's length. Aradirith just sort of waiting. Thranduil has been lazy all battle, but he is finally getting himself into a position where he can fight. Gwathi Myrdain are fighting. Although they're probably going to be just shot by the crossbows. Here we go. And in this situation, the Myrdain are strong, but they've already been in melee. They've already lost some unit models. They're going to be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of Mirkwood infantry. And the attackers in the end, Mirkwood definitely did the right thing by not being the vanguard. Letting Rudauer take the brunt of the casualties early has allowed Mirkwood's quality to really come into sharp focus here in the late game, when the depleted defenders really had no answer for it. And ultimately that counter-attack out of the gate, those two units of Imladris Blade Masters and that unit of Imladris Sentries, which were butchered by that Heavy Goblin Crossbow unit, and the Thranduil Berserkers, that was really the turning point. Because up till then, the attackers looked fairly comfortable holding the choke points, but now, less so. You have to imagine where an extra couple of units of Blade Masters and Sentries would have got them on this fight over here, particularly if they sort of came around from the side. Could have been real nasty. But in the end, fine margins, that's what the defenders always have to work on, whereas the attackers have got much more margin for error. This front line's still holding. Obviously, a combination of Uruk-hai pikemen and Guards of Orthanc is a pretty meaty front line. One that won't go down too easily, but it's also one that isn't going to get too many kills too quickly, so really, I think that's Elrond being gutted. Alas, poor Elrond. Hirialth coming in from the side, from the rear. We had to get a rear charge on this really final front line here from Angel of Death. Wasn't really any terrible play from both sides. That Imladris mistake was obviously a fairly significant one from Dump Truck, but overall I thought Imladris played just fine. Maybe he was a little bit overzealous over there against Mordor as well with his Heru Vital and Guardians, but again, I'd much rather people be too aggressive than too conservative. Because at least you're being active rather than just sort of watching your army disintegrate. I thought Bobo for Harad and Angel of Death for Isengard did pretty well as well, supporting the Imladris forces, also using their own elites pretty effectively, mostly as well. Those champions of Nafrat and Uruk-hai Berserkers ended up dying off far more quickly than I would have thought on the front line. But well played from the attackers ultimately. It looked pretty grim for them early on. I mean, the Misty Mountains had a terrible start, but in the end that crossbow play may very well have been the thing which pushed the attackers into having a significant advantage in this fight.
Our men flee. Rally them. And remember, an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep.
Yeah, but Mirkwood and Rudau organised themselves very well as well. I think Rudau going in first, using their javelins very nicely, and then Mirkwood coming in with the steel chair, the metaphorical steel chair, with all of their really high quality basic units. But I have to give the MVP to Mordor, honestly. Regardless of kills, I feel as though Mordor, considering the fact that he was basically on his own after the Misty Mountains attack went so poorly, yeah, he sort of rationed out his units really very, very well. And he was constantly sort of re-manoeuvring his troops and reorganising to sort of try and get the most out of them. The catapults, the javelins, his infantry. He opened up the other gate when he could have just sort of kept trying to mindlessly push through that gate. He opened up this one over here as well to try and divide the forces. The attack was unsuccessful, but he still sort of split the defenders a little bit. And yeah, I give Mordor the MVP overall. I think he played really, really well, considering the hand he was dealt, and considering the army he picked as well, because I feel as though he could have been more effective with some archers of any quality, but particularly the Shadow Guard would have been particularly nice to have. So yeah, but overall, a pretty good fight. No one made any major mistakes, I must say. And ultimately, a close fight within 10%. And most of the units that are left, it has to be said, are Mirkwood's army, with a bit of Mordor mixed in. A lot of Rudar and the Misty Mountains have fallen by the wayside. Here come the Aradirith. Thranduil, I guess, is going to march through, surveying his newfound land. A real dump at the moment, Osgiliath, with its ruined buildings, but I'm sure he can fix that right up. It's got its ×2 speed, I think. I do not believe that very depleted Dunlanders are going to be able to turn the fortunes of the defenders around, but still, a closely fought fight. Bogdan Ironfoot was the one who sent this one to me, now I remember, which I can only assume is Bobo, although Bobo's Discord name is Bobo. Confusing, very confusing. Fury out. Dunlanders. Troll Catapult, content to pad its kill count even further. Here come the Nazgul, killing off that one Nazkai that was remaining. Treachery will not be brooked by Sauron. Here come the Haradrim, immediately routing in the face of the Nazgul. Even the Orc Javelins want a piece of the action in melee at this late stage of the battle. Those Imladris Blade Masters will return.
Curse the sun that shines on our disgrace. Curses. Our men no longer command. Our men have taken control of the castle.
Thank you very much, announcer. Very, very handy information. Goblin King bodyguard moving forward. Imladris sentries taking a ton of arrow fire from the Agwe Inanwe and the Aradirith. The Athalion as well. That Agwe Inanwe, has that even been involved in the fight? We'll be able to tell by Mirkwood's kills just how much they put their feet up during the battle, and only really started to commit themselves when the defenders were tired and exhausted. Oh, we've got some strange animation glitches going on again. T-posing and then going 2D. Yeah, the Witch Realm Enslavers prove themselves to be nice and strong as well.
Our army is tiring.
And here we go, the Imladris Blade Masters will be the last ones on the field.
Curses! Our enemy has command of the castle.
Which is ironic, considering the losses that they incurred may very well have been the things which finally made the battle unwinnable by the defenders, in hindsight. But Mirkwood will probably be pleased by the performance of their slaves.
Warriors weep with the shame of this defeat. Next time will be different.
Possibly. Again, this was winnable by the defenders. I feel as though, especially with how they started, and yeah, Mirkwood definitely taking it easy. only committing themselves late on, and I feel vindicated in my committal as putting Mordor forward as the MVPs. I think Ricky Beagle did very, very well indeed, both in terms of kills and in how he played. Isengard didn't get very many kills, but also they had by far and away the largest army of the defenders. They actually had the largest army on the field total. So they went for more of a quantity approach to sort of try and be the foil to Harad and Imladris's more quality focus. Harad getting more kills than Imladris, and again, I feel as though that was because Imladris, ultimately, a few of their units were wasted a little bit. And obviously the Demons of the Desert proving themselves to be very strong. Let's see what got the kills actually for Harad. Champions of Nafrat getting a lot of kills, considering the fact that they were only in melee for a little while. Trollmen, very differing fortunes. Southron Warband getting a good amount of kills again. Southron Pikemen again. These Southron units, the pole arms with the AP, can be very useful provided they get into the right engagement for them. The Hashari, very good at sort of supporting defences all around the battlefield. Maybe not a huge amount of kills, but they were sort of in micro engagements, and obviously in terms of like overall survivability, their lack of armour will eventually start to be quite telling. Yeah, the Demons of the Desert getting the most kills for Harad, unsurprisingly, and a lot of those was on stuff like Blackback Berserkers. Ferodrum Javelins also took a few losses, although ultimately that was where the Demons of the Desert were defeated. Heavy Goblin Spears as well. Quite a few units getting over 100 kills as well, Haradrim Archers. The Catapult ultimately was maybe not as effective as Bobo was hoping. But yeah, very well played, I think. I think the attackers deserve quite a lot of credit for how they organised themselves. The defenders, not terrible. Isengard, ultimately, that's not a huge amount of kills considering the discrepancy between Isengard and his allies, but Isengard also were playing a very different role, I feel like, in this battle. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next, which will be another Third Age battle, I believe, but I've got a bit of a backlog, so I'll make the decision as and when I can. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.